We're talking about this book here, Yellowface by R.F.Kuang. And if you've watched any of my videos or if you're familiar with this channel, I don't really do trendy books. I don't really go for hot topics. I don't really hop on the trend ever. But this popped up on kind of like my Instagram feed and I was like, I'm really intrigued, and I read it. And then I did this terrible thing of going onto Goodreads and actually checking out the reviews, which I never do before any of my book videos. But I think I read like one or two, only because I felt that there would be a very torn opinion about this book, but I didn't know to what extent. And honestly, reading even two reviews gave me an absolute headache. I personally, like, I'm very like pro social media. Like, I've been on Instagram, I've been back in the day on Facebook, I've been on YouTube for a long time, but I've never really been on Twitter, and I'm not someone who comments on a lot of things or reads a lot of comments. I mean, I read your guys' comments and I love interacting with my own community, but I'm not someone who basically engages. I don't think I've ever left, like, unless I have something good to say, I don't say anything. Basically, I'm that kind of a person. And the discourse was just crazy over this book. So, and I kind of felt like this was important to mention because this book does go into Goodreads comments and it's very meta. I don't know how to really summarize this entire book in a review. I think it's going to be incredibly hard, but I wanted to talk about it because I did really enjoy it. And I'm saying this as someone who read this book or like listened to the audiobook in less than 2 days, and I have a full-time job. I have so much shit going on, but even then I kept like looking for pockets of time where I could really finish this book. Mostly when I was like cleaning the house, doing chores, I would just listen to it, and I felt like I was so gripped the whole time. It's really different. I've read the Poppy War, just the first book. I haven't read the second and the third. I would have to say like fantasy is probably not my main genre, but still I really appreciate, like, out of all the fantasy I've read in my reading career, that's probably one that I did enjoy more than the others. But it's not that I didn't like it, that's why I didn't go back to it. Even Babel, I believe, is more to do with like dark academia, which I might pick up at some point, but it's just not the kind of books, names or covers that draw me in. But the moment I saw this, it's like everything about the book just drew me in, and I felt like this was definitely written for someone like me. Whereas I feel like if her general readers are fantasy readers, they might not 100% love this. Okay, so that being said, I don't know if that was a disclaimer or just a bit of pretext, but let's get into the review. This book is about a girl called Juniper Song and her friend Athena, whose last name I don't remember, but Athena's Chinese and Juniper is white. They don't ever clarify what kind of white, but just white American. And R.F.Kuang herself is also a Chinese American, I believe. Let me look this up before I get this wrong. A lot of criticism that people had about this book is that they saw a lot of R.F.Kuang in Athena's character, the Chinese character, who I would say was like the sub-protagonist because she also played a very big part in the book. So she is, yeah, her nationality is Chinese, but I guess she is American Chinese. And she's only 27 years old. Wow, like that's really impressive. She's already one of those authors where anytime she even talks about a book or releases a book, people are dying to get their hands on it. So that's incredibly impressive. I do have to say, like, whenever I see people my age or younger doing so well, immediately I'm just like, this is so impressive. Well done, you. A huge part of this book is a commentary on the publishing world. A lot of people put this as, you know, R.F.Kuang trying to put herself in Athena and then comment on the racism in the publishing industry or like the misogyny and all these different aspects. And it was a very political book, which I agree, but I also think that this book is so layered in the way that, like, it talks to people at a very visceral level of like things like jealousy and want and I think to a large extent entitlement. I think so much of this book deals with so many like soft things or like issues at the same time talking about very like hardcore political issues that sometimes it becomes difficult to separate the narrative from the political, I guess, and the main story. But in no way did it feel like that was distracting. I do feel like if you know a lot about an author and if you've like really done your research about them, then if you see that author in the book too much, it can be distracting. And this was my issue with the last book. I talked about Dolly Alderton's Ghosts, and I felt like it was too much of the author in there, and I can see when people can see that. But I feel like this was an autofiction in a way that it's very apparent that this is R.F.Kuang, but also not like she doesn't paint herself in a perfect way. It's like all the characters in this book are morally gray. Everyone's got very real issues. Everyone's got really unresolved issues, and I feel like every part of this is just what makes it really real. So I'll give you a bit of a plot point without spoiling anything. The book begins with Juniper talking about how she's kind of like failing at being an author. Her debut was not really, anything that people were talking about. She's quite disappointed in her career so far, but then she can't help but compare it constantly to Athena's career, who is her friend from college. And they, like, Athena is Chinese American, and when she came out of university, it felt like the whole world was just ready to just boost her and catapult her and throw her into the limelight and do everything that she needed to become like a successful published author. And Juniper just didn't feel like she had that support, and in a way it also felt like, she had a lot of resentment towards how much of the world is currently moving towards this whole idea about diversity and inclusion, where almost by being a model minority, you get a higher seat at a table, or like a better seat at a table than you do by being a plain Jane white American. And this is I actually absolutely agree with this, because I feel like me, myself, I am definitely minority. I'm Indian by descent, I'm Assamese. Even within India, a lot of people don't know where Assam is. My background is definitely very, very, very much that of a minority. But I moved here and I've, formed my own life here, formed my own career here, and I worked incredibly hard for this. But even at that level, I can't help but think that sometimes maybe I would have certain opportunities or intrigue from certain people because I am minority, but also I maybe don't perform cliches that they expect these people from these minorities to perform. So in this case, being a Chinese American, R.F.Kuang has written a lot of books about, especially Poppy War is a very dark fantasy about the wars, and it's not something that is light. But also at the same time, she's not experienced that herself. But still, a lot of research and hard work has gone into writing that book and putting it out there. And this narrative kind of shows that people almost dismiss certain things like, oh, how can you be writing about a Korean war story when you're white? How can you be writing about a Chinese war story when you're a Chinese American? You've never really actually experienced that. You've never even lived in China. So almost like that really, we're coming to that point where there is so much emphasis on who is the right person to tell a story and what's the right way to say a story. And there's so much about that it becomes almost like, wow, like we are gatekeeping so much without realizing that we're gatekeeping, and we try to find issues in things where like nobody else is interested in saying that story. Then why are we finding faults when someone is trying to say that story? And on top of that, there's so much hidden commentary on like, even while being white like Juniper and having these potentially racist remarks, or maybe even taking advantage of the fact, like she sometimes say like, oh, she only got it because she's a model minority, and I didn't get it because I'm just another white woman. And at the same breath, she also says that, oh my god, my book is being picked up by Trump supporters, I hate this. So there is just like, I feel like there's the certain level of kind of openness you need to have with the narrative to actually understand it. It's very, very intelligently written, but also it can operate like a slap in the face if you even miss like one thing that she's mentioned in the beginning. You miss that somehow, and then you come and you read something else. It can definitely throw you off and be like, what the hell is she talking about? But from there, the story progresses where there's a bit of talk about like stealing stories from certain people, stealing stories from different cultures, and just so many things packaged, just so many incredible themes packaged into a really short book, which I think should be read by everyone. And if you read it, I would say maybe from your own opinions, come back and watch this video and tell me if you agree, because I'm really curious. There isn't a lot that I have to say about R.F.Kuang herself. I think I took this book as a sole piece of art. I disregarded who wrote it for a second, because in this case I was able to. In certain cases I feel like it's too much, but in this case I felt like I just took the book for what it is. I took it for her art, and I was really intrigued by the way she said the story, because it's again very meta. It definitely has so many references to current pop culture and society. I actually find it really impressive when people are able to write about their current condition and current world and mention things like social media, Taylor Swift, Florence Pugh, and not do it in a cringy way, because honestly if I sit down to do that, I feel like I will fail, and it's not an easy feat. So sometimes I think it requires a bit of almost like, you know, putting the fact aside what time period you're writing for, but focusing more on, if I want to create a snapshot of what's happening today in today's world and put that out as a book for people to understand that things are far more complicated than they are at face value, and that you need to think at a far deeper level in order to understand where people are coming from and why they're saying certain things, and that there is no way to be a fully kind of righteous person because of how many institutions and many in society in itself is just kind of pit against you. And I think this is something that I really agree with. A lot of people, you know, are kind of obsessed with this idea that no matter who you are and what position of society you are, no matter how rich or poor you are, you can always take the morally right route, and you can always take like the higher ground, and you know, you can always make the right decisions. But what the right decision is for you and someone else can differ to a very, you know, large extent. And I'm not saying that it's okay for people to go around doing dodgy things, but what I'm trying to say is, what she's portrayed is that sometimes, you know, you find yourself in a corner where it's like, it's either this or no one from your part of society will ever make it anywhere. And in a way they say, like she writes about Athena, understanding the fact that, you know, people push her in that category of like, she now can only write about Chinese history and Chinese culture because that's her brand, and to break away from the brand is so difficult because that's what the society demands from her. And in a way she understood that, so she fed the monster that kept demanding the same branding out of her. And I think that is what I loved about the book, because she made a commentary about breaking brand while breaking brand. And I don't think there's a better way to put it. Like, if you can break your brand and you can basically say, F you guys, I am going to do something completely different, and by the way, I'm going to do it in a way that is going to leave people talking. I don't think this book is necessarily a comfortable read for people in the publishing industry, but I think, you know, we can all take ourselves less seriously sometimes, and I think this book is exactly that she's proven that no matter what, you know, you throw at her, what kind of concept or what subject, she's fully capable of spinning a story around it that's very compelling. I did not enjoy the third act whatsoever, this whole thing about Candace and all of that, like you'll see when you read the story, but it did make me hate the book, because I feel like she did kind of another meta part where she was like, I don't know where this book is going at this point, but okay, let me stitch up an ending. And that's exactly what it felt like. But at the same time, it leaves you with that impression of like, you know, Juniper, she goes through so much shit and so much happens to her, but she'll at some point be able to bounce back, because cancel culture truly doesn't exist. It firstly truly ruins people's lives, and then it comes back and it forgives the people who do the worst things. And most of the time you only truly get cancelled if you're an absolute nobody. If you're someone who has the money to pave your way back into the limelight, most of the time you succeed. And I think this is really true. I don't think I've ever participated in cancel culture, because I know that the moment the person comes back with something that's very entertaining, people are going to be back at it. And I think that's a problem, that American society especially is so obsessed with entertainment, that in the name of entertainment they're willing to forgive a lot, and in the name of entertainment they're also willing to, you know, look past a lot of things, which I think is really problematic. Apart from the things that I've said in this video, there's a lot more packed into this book, and I think that it kind of inspired me to think a little differently about authors that more or less do the same thing again and again, because how much of it is this kind of like virtual brand, virtual box that you've created, that you're stuffing yourself inside, that your manager is stuffing you inside, and you just can't break out of it. And that's why, you know, having a platform like YouTube and me being able to just put out anything that I want to and not find a kind of like a solid brand for myself and just do it because I enjoy it, I find that so liberating. And whenever I read books like this, I think I find more and more joy in just being able to put out art that I find really, really satisfying and I kind of love creating. So that's my take on the book. I'd be really curious to know what you guys think. This is definitely going to cause some controversy. I'm not going to read any more comments because that honestly gave me a headache, but I'm very curious to know what you guys think. So let me know, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.